January 20th, 2022, Melikeskaya Settlement, Tukevsky District, Republic of Tatarstan. Today there is a big celebration here, the wedding of 21-year-old Alsusa Bashnikova and 25-year-old Timur Prokhorov. Guests from all over the Republic have gathered for the wedding, the banquet is lively and crowded, the beautiful bride is accepting congratulations with a smile, and the newlyweds keep exchanging loving glances. The bride's mother gives a toast, thanking Timur for the happiness he has brought her daughter, and wishes the couple a long family life. However, very soon this happiness and life will come to an end. In 3 days, the relatives of the newlyweds will have to gather in their house again, but this time the reason will be completely different. And 4 days after the wedding, Alsusa Bashnikova will be lying in the local cemetery in the same grave with her husband, the man who, according to many, took her life. Alsusa Bashnikova was born in 2001. She was the youngest child in a family of 2 children. When the girl was little, her parents divorced, and her mother remarried, taking the surname Shiryev. Both Alsu and her older brother Ruslan warmly accepted their stepfather. Until her very death, the girl maintained a good relationship with him. Soon the family moved to the settlement of Melikeskoye, which is located 21 kilometers from the city of Naberezhny Chelny. There, Alsui spent the rest of her short life. The settlement of Melikeskoye is quite small, with a population of about 1,000 people, and almost all the residents know each other. In the village live Croatians, baptized Tatars and Russians. There are quite a few houses under construction. In recent years, people have started returning from the city to the village, trying to build a life here. There is a school and a club in the village where they sometimes hold discos. Alsu and her brother quickly got used to village life. The girl started at a new school and quickly made friends. By nature, Alsu was calm and serious, and she approached everything responsibly. She did well in her studies and was an excellent student at school. Many wanted to be friends with the sweet and kind girl, and she responded to others' warmth with her own. Teachers remember that Alsu was a calm and quiet girl who never quarreled with anyone. One of Alsu's closest friends until her death was her paternal cousin, Sabrina Sobashnikova. Some sources mistakenly stated that they were sisters. Sabrina was 3 years younger than Alsu, but such an age difference did not bother the girls at all. They were very close, constantly messaging each other on social networks, sharing their sorrows and joys with one another. The girls looked alike, and outwardly it might have seemed that they were not cousins but real sisters. Alsu's mother, Ilfira Shirieva, couldn't stop rejoicing over her honor student daughter and was proud of her achievements. The only thing that saddened and upset the woman was the chronic kidney disease that Alsu developed at an early age and which gradually progressed. The girl often traveled to Naberezhny Chelny for treatment, and she underwent hemodialysis multiple times. Alsu really wanted to study to become an economist, but she understood that because of her illness, she would not be able to get an education after school, and this upset her very much. For some time, closer to the end of school, the girl was homeschooled. Due to her illness, she couldn't prepare well for the exams. Her mom comforted her, saying, "You can earn a living without higher education? Do what you love, there are many professions." Alsu tried not to get discouraged, although sad thoughts still visited her from time to time. The girl wanted to live a full life, not to be a burden to anyone. She strove for independence as much as possible and planned for the future. Sometimes I thought she was even wiser than me, her mother. Every word she spoke and every action she took was carefully considered, Alsu's mother recalled. At school, the girl met Timur Prokhorovs, her future husband. Timur was 4 years older than her. He was a tall, handsome but modest guy. Timur's parents were also not locals. They moved to the village from Naberezhny Chelny. In Melikes, they were known as decent, hard-working people. Timur had an older brother, Artur, with whom he was very close. The parents raised both sons strictly, but loved them very much. The sons, in return, treated their mother and father with respect and warmth. When the family started building a new house after moving, the boys helped their parents, carried bricks, and swept the yard. According to his relatives' memories, Timur had a kind heart. He never got into fights and preferred to solve everything with words, by reaching agreements. The young man was not proud and easily admitted when he was wrong, was always ready to help, respected elders, and loved children. When Artur got married and moved to Naberezhny Chelny, he often brought his children to visit his brother. Timur adored his nephews and often played with them. Later, Alsu shared this same love. Shall we go somewhere? My 5-year-old daughter asks if we are going to see them, because she loved both her uncle Timur and Alsu very much. When we arrived, she immediately ran to Timur, hugged him and told him everything, Artur said. Back when Timur was in school, after a short but painful illness, his mother passed away. The woman was consumed by cancer in just a few months. In the last weeks, she was constantly taking painkillers. They didn't always help. Timur and Artur took their mother's death very hard. However, when Timur's father brought a new wife into the house, both brothers treated their stepmother warmly. There was no hostility between them. Back in school, Timur participated in amateur performances and danced in the Eshelek ensemble, which performed at the local club Mai. Even after school, Timur was invited to perform. Some guys come to the club a bit tipsy, but Timur has never been seen drunk or even slightly tipsy, recalls the club manager Lyudmila Adamova. After school, the young man went to the army. He served in the navy. Alsus, whom he was already dating by that time, was waiting for him to return from the army and missed him very much. After returning, the young man got a job as a mason with his father, who had also moved to live in Naberezhny Chelny. Timur earned quite well. He could easily provide for his family. Timur treated Alsu with great care and tenderness. He knew about her illness and often traveled with her to Kazan, took her to procedures. He protected Alsu like a treasure. When hospital visits were necessary, he requested time off work, and they would depart for Kazan at 3 ante-meridium. This was before they were married. In short, he took care of her, cherished her, Artur said. In 2018, Alsu's condition worsened so much that the only solution was a kidney transplant surgery. The girl was literally on the verge of life and death. Because of severe swelling, Alsu's face became puffy and almost unrecognizable. The girl was worried about her appearance and didn't even want to see Timur. Alsu's family lived modestly and wouldn't have been able to raise money for treatment on their own. But luck and kind people from her village, who knew about the girl's illness and sympathized with her, helped. A charity concert was organized in the village, and the money raised was given to Alsu. With it, she paid for the surgery. Timur and his family also contributed. The young man took part in the concert, performing together with the ensemble. Before the operation, Alsu had to spend 8 months on regular hemodialysis in Kazan. The girl's kidney transplant was performed in Moscow, and Alsu's donor was her mother. The woman didn't hesitate to sacrifice her own health to save the life of her beloved child. The surgery was successful, but after it, Alsu had to endure a long and serious recovery period. For almost 4 months, and according to some sources, even half a year, she stayed in the hospital before returning home. The rehabilitation lasted for another year. Alsu had to carefully control her diet, limit herself physically, and during this time she hardly left the house. The recovery period was tough, even psychologically. The girl was worried about her condition, constantly anxious, afraid that the kidney might not take. She had read and heard about such cases, also understood that her life depended on whether the new organ would take or not. She definitely wouldn't get a second chance like this. Alsu's mother and stepfather shared her worries. They were also worried about Timur. After all, he's a young guy, and here the girl has such a serious illness. The parents were almost sure that Timur would break up with Alsu because of her illness, but unexpectedly the young man surprised them. It seemed that, on the contrary, his determination to stay by Alsu's side only grew stronger. Timur was constantly by the girl's side, saying warm words and just holding her hand. When Alsu was upset or felt unwell, he encouraged her. "You are strong, you can do anything," he would say. Neither the girl herself nor her parents ever heard any complaints or dissatisfaction from Timur. At that time, after Alsu returned from the hospital, Timur proposed to her. The girl happily agreed. The parents said their love blossomed right before everyone's eyes. Everyone in the village knew that Timur and Alsu loved each other and would definitely get married. Alsu loved her boyfriend and wanted to spend the rest of her life with him, But still, sometimes she sighed, doubted and worried. "Why do you need me, such a sick wife?" she asked. But Timur was optimistic. "We will overcome everything together. Don't worry, I'm with you. We will conquer everything." Naberezhny Chelny is located very close to the village and many residents of Melikes worked there. But for Alsu, daily trips to the city and back would have been a tough challenge. The most reasonable option for her was to get a profession that would allow her to work from home. Alsu found a solution by taking courses to become a nail technician and lash extension specialist. According to other sources, she self-taught and gained a profession. Next, she needed to find clients. "You'll be my businesswoman," Timur told the girl when he found out she decided to work from home. The guy was glad that Alsu had found her calling and got the opportunity to fulfill herself. And the girl herself was uplifted. She didn't want to be a burden on her parents or her future husband. Rumors about the girl's new profession spread quickly throughout the small village. Clients started coming to the Bashnikov's house. Alsu always worked conscientiously, she was praised, and people kept coming back to her again and again. Unfortunately, complications after her illness soon forced the girl to stop working with eyelashes, and Alsu focused only on manicures. Half a year before the official wedding, Timur and Alsu had a nikah according to Muslim tradition and started living in the former Prokhorovs family home. According to some sources, they lived on the second floor of the garage, since the house was still not finished. There is conflicting information about whether there were scandals in the Prokhorovs and Bashnikova family. Almost all close friends and relatives say that the couple loved each other very much. Both Timur and Alsu were calm by nature, so there were no quarrels in the family. They lived quietly except on holidays when guests came over and voices could be heard in the house. Of course, like in any couple, there were conflicts, but that's a part of life, you can't avoid it. But it never came to fights. Timur was not the kind of man who could raise his hand against a woman. He wasn't brought up that way, and besides, he loved Alsu too much. However, among their acquaintances, there were some who claimed that Timur often lost his temper and yelled at his wife. These shouts were supposedly even heard out on the street. Someone even claimed that Timur was a real domestic tyrant who only pretended to be calm and loving. As for Alsu, the sick girl was too frightened and loved her husband too much to tell anyone what was really happening in her family. Besides, she felt guilty because of her health problems. And Timur, like a classic abuser, probably convinced her that without him she would be needed by no one. Now it's impossible to know for sure. On January 4th, 2022, Alsu turned 21, and on January 20th, she and Timur Prokhorovs got married. There were a lot of guests, and since there was no hotel in the village, the visitors stayed at the homes of Alsu's parents and Timur's relatives. Sabrina Bashnikova, who also came for the wedding, stayed at the newlyweds' house. The girl was studying at a college in Naberezhny Chelny and planned to return to the city in a couple of days, when the celebrations were over, but that didn't happen. The tragedy happened on January 23rd, 2022. Alsu's mother, Elfira Shirieva, woke up with a heavy feeling. At night, she had a bad dream. Timur came up to her and for some reason silently started giving her small coins. Elfira started asking him why, but Timur didn't answer and just kept looking at her, putting the money in her hands. Suddenly the woman woke up. It was 5 in the morning. A heavy feeling arose in her chest. The first thought was that something had happened. Early in the morning, the woman decided to call her daughter and son-in-law to find out how they were doing, but their phones didn't answer, and Sabrina didn't pick up either. With a heavy heart, Elfira got ready and went to the newlyweds' house. There was no Timur's car at the gate, but at that time she didn't pay attention to it. There was silence in the yard, but there was nothing unusual about it. After all, it was still early morning. It's quite possible that both the young ones and Sabrina are still sleeping. Elfira Shirieva entered the house and called her daughter by name. When no one answered, the woman frowned. Could it be that Alsu, Timur and Sabrina had left the house open? She moved further, calling Alsu and her husband by name, and suddenly stopped on the threshold of the living room and clutched her heart. The scene that appeared before her eyes was horrifying. The floor was covered in blood. In a pool of blood lay the lifeless bodies of Alsu and Sabrina. Both girls were dead, their bodies literally stabbed with a knife. Later, the forensic medical examination will determine. Each girl's body had at least 15 stab wounds, and some of the wounds were inflicted with scissors. Whoever took the girls' lives was cruel and merciless. When she saw her daughter's mutilated body, Alsu's mother had a hysterical fit. She ran out of the house and rushed to her husband. While he was calling the police, the woman screamed, cried several times, and almost lost consciousness. She just couldn't believe what was happening. Alsu's stepfather questioned her about Timur's whereabouts, but she was too distraught to respond, continuing to scream and cry. At 7:50 in the morning, the police arrived at the house, and relatives and fellow villagers started to gather. Only Timur himself was missing, and no one could find him anywhere. The relatives tried to call the guy, but he didn't answer his phone. It was Timur Prokhorov who immediately became the main suspect. The police assumed that the guy had killed the girls and fled, just as any other criminal would have done in his place. Alsu's mother dismissed the theory that her son-in-law was involved in Alsu's death. A loving husband couldn't suddenly turn into a monster, she said. After all, Timur was literally ready to carry his beloved in his arms. Even if there was a quarrel, he could never have raised a hand against Alsu, not to mention taking her life. I'm 100% sure that Timur didn't commit this crime, the woman insisted. It's impossible to believe that. I used to visit them almost every day, call them every hour, write to them, and I would directly ask my daughter if everything was okay with them. She always answered that everything was fine, that he adored her and treated her with respect. Soon another investigative team arrived at the house. The investigators who got out of the car were surprised to see their colleagues in the yard and a crowd of crying people. The newcomers told those gathered yet another shocking piece of news. Not far from Yelabuga, at the parking lot of a roadside cafe, truckers found Timur's car, and inside it was Timur himself, dead, with a gunshot wound to the head. A rifle that belonged to Timur's father lay on the seat next to the body. Everything looked as if the guy had taken his own life, and now it was becoming clear why. The preliminary version drawn up by the investigation was as follows. Timur Prokhorov, during a quarrel with his wife, killed her and the girl who was present in the house, possibly because he didn't want to leave a witness, or possibly because she was also involved in the quarrel. After that, he took 2 shotguns from his father's safe, left the city, and coming to his senses and realizing what he had done, took his own life. On the same day, a criminal case was opened on the fact of causing the death of 2 or more people. Investigators began questioning witnesses. Soon, the picture of what happened was supplemented with new, rather strange details. On the night of January 22 to 23, 2022, a traditional disco was held in the village of Milikes. The club was located very close to the newlyweds' house. Timur and Alsu didn't go to the disco because they had guests who stayed late. One of the women leaving the club, a resident of the settlement, remembered seeing 2 cars near the Prokhorov house. One, a Lada Priora, belonged to Timur. The second, as the investigation later assumed, belonged to one of the guests. Around 1 in the morning, Timur left the house to see off the last of the guests, his friend Arsen. This was recorded by a surveillance camera located on the building next to the house. Even though the guy lived quite nearby, Timur returned to his wife only at 2:40, that is, about an hour and a half after he left. All this time, Alsu was waiting for her husband and was very worried. Later, Elfera Shirieva recalled that Timur was missing from the house for about an hour. Where was he during this time? Milikes is a big village. Maybe he met someone on the way. Some bad person, I can't even explain. The correspondence with his friend Alsu Aneya has been preserved. He went to see someone off and then disappeared, wrote Alsu at 1 in the morning. When Timur returned, she wrote, "He came to sleep, we're going to bed, all is well, thanks for your help." It's unknown how Timur explained to his wife
his long absence.
Based on the message, it appeared the explanation was clear and accepted by the woman. However, everything could have been just an appearance, and the events that unfolded later proved it. Early in the morning, while it was still dark, Timur Prokhorov left his house, got into his car and drove toward Nabrezhny Chelny. He never returned back again. No one entered the newlyweds' house again until the body was discovered. This was evident from the surveillance camera footage. Consequently, the criminal was actually Timur Prokhorovs. However, as it turned out, the guy was not only responsible for a double homicide, but also for something else. There are two versions of the events that happened that night, each of which has the right to exist. According to the first version, after bidding his friend farewell, Timur went back to the house but remained outside. Instead, the guy got into his car and headed to Naberezhny Chelny, where a 47-year-old masseuse was waiting for him, a meeting he had arranged on the way by mobile phone. The woman's name did not appear in the media, but it is known that she received clients around the clock at her apartment. This circumstance led many to assume that she also provided intimate services. Be that as it may, the woman was not surprised by the client's desire to come for a procedure at night. Timur easily arranged the meeting. Arriving at the specified address, the young man went up to the apartment, and the woman provided him with services, including intimate ones. However, this time, for some reason, the young man refused to pay for the massage. According to some reports, when the woman began to protest and said she would report him to the police for abuse, he started beating her with his fists and feet, hitting her on the head and body, and kept beating her until she lost consciousness. After that, Timur ran out of the apartment, went to his car, got in, and drove home. The investigation theorized that jealousy caused the conflict. The visit to the massage therapist also fits into this picture. Timur could have found out something about Alsu right at the wedding, or he could have just gotten jealous of her with someone and decided to get back at her by cheating. He was drunk, alcohol clouded his mind. After returning, he could have confessed. Alsu or the girl may have figured it out herself. That's when the argument started, which ended fatally for Alsu and Sabrina. In the second case, Timur went to the masseuse after he had already dealt with the girls. It all happened under extreme stress. The guy wasn't fully aware of what was going on. He just needed to release his adrenaline somewhere. His agitated state triggered a fit of aggression and made him attack the woman. Whatever the case, the outcome of that terrible night was the same. Early in the morning on January 24th, Timur Prokhorovs stopped on the M7 highway and, taking his father's shotgun, put it under his chin. The shot was fatal. Shortly before his death at 7:03 anti-meridium, Timur logged into his social media profile. By that time, according to the forensic medical examination of the girl, both were already dead. The explanation involving jealousy and infidelity did not fit with the young man's character or with the testimonies of friends who were at the newlyweds' home that night. However, there was a circumstance in the case that allowed the investigation to accept it as the main one. During the search, investigators found powerful prescription drugs, narcotic analgesics and painkillers in the newlyweds' home left over after the death of Timur's mother. A theory was put forward that Prokhorovs took these pills on that fateful evening since he suffered from an addiction to prohibited substances. And since after the gathering with guests he was also drunk, the effect of clouded consciousness occurred. They also questioned Alsu's mother, who had mostly regained her composure by then. The woman remembered that in the morning of January 23rd, two men approached Timur's house. They were neatly dressed, but according to Shirieva, they were not quite in their right mind. They might have been drunk? The men approached Alsu's mother and started asking her where Timur was and when he would return. They said that the day before he had pushed one of them and didn't apologize. Apparently, the men wanted to seek justice. Shirieva was in shock over her daughter's death. She didn't remember the appearance of the strange men and certainly didn't ask their names. The neighbors witnessed the conversation, but they also couldn't describe the mysterious men. The mother of the deceased, Sabrina Bashnikova, was also in shock over what had happened. The 18-year-old girl went to her close relative's wedding, only to be brutally stabbed by her husband. It seemed like a terrible nightmare. We were like close friends. We could talk calmly about anything. She never kept secrets from me, the woman recalled. Elfera and her daughter Alsu were very close friends since childhood, alike in both appearance and character. They were non-confrontational, positive, and always supportive of each other, staying together even in difficult times. Bashnikova also didn't believe in Timur's guilt. She was sure that someone else, possibly out of envy, had committed the terrible crime. She even suggested that the girls were killed by mistake. Maybe the attackers confused the houses and wanted to harm someone else. Meanwhile, news about the crime appeared in the media, and as was logical to assume, the murder of the girls was presented in a dramatic way. There was a classic abusive relationship in the couple, journalists wrote. Timur Prokhorovs suffered from an addiction to illegal substances and constantly abused his young wife. Some sources claimed that Timur openly hated Alsu and had long been planning to get rid of her. He felt the same strong hatred towards Sabrina Bashnikova. In the village, this version caused a wave of indignation, especially among the relatives of Alsu and Timur. Angry posts appeared on social media before the journalists from Kazan arrived in the village. People were closing their doors. But the sensation was already living its own life. According to Timur's father, Prokhorovs, many of those who did agree to interviews were practically unfamiliar with the young people. Some people had just heard rumors and many just wanted to get publicity from someone else's tragedy. They wrote on the internet that Timur beat Alsu. What nonsense. We know here even who yells at their own child. If he had beaten her, we would have known. This was told by Lydia Fordinova, a library worker who knew both Timur and Alsu well. Despite the terrible and only version blaming the son-in-law, Alsu's mother insisted that her daughter be buried in the same grave with Timur. It so happened that his mother's grave was nearby. The funeral took place on the 24th of January. About 60 people came to see the young couple off on their final journey. Many were sobbing uncontrollably. Elfira Shirieva herself fainted several times. On the way to the cemetery, the woman was literally carried in people's arms. Sabrina Bashnikova was buried in her hometown of Izhevsk. On January 26th, a video message from Prokhorovs appeared on the internet. The man claimed that, according to the results of the forensic examination, a large number of bruises and signs of beatings were found on Timur's body. In addition, the man insisted that there was too much blood in the car where the body was found. The investigation claimed that Timur shot himself in the chin. There should have been much more blood in the car's interior. Prokhorovs was sure that his son had been shot, and that the already dead body was placed in the car, and the bruises meant that Timur had also been beaten before his death. However, representatives of the investigative committee officially denied Prokhorovs' statement the very next day. There were no signs of beating found on Timur's body. Moreover, if someone else had shot Timur with a gun, they would hardly have pressed the barrel to his chin. The wound was typical of a self-inflicted gunshot injury. Timur's father also questioned the version involving the assault on the masseuse. The woman was providing intimate services, so the sexual act with Timur could very well have been consensual. It seemed the man was ready to grasp at straws just to avoid believing in his son's guilt. But, as expected, his version did not find support. Timur Prokhorovs' relatives were determined to get to the truth. The young man's father promised to go all the way to Moscow in search of justice, and Timur's brother Artur, who worked in the Ministry of Internal Affairs, promised to conduct his own investigation. But it soon reached a dead end. If there was any new evidence or circumstances, they did not leak onto the internet. The investigation was quite satisfied with the version that Timur Prokhorovs was guilty. They followed through with it, and the case was closed due to the death of the suspect in June of 2022.